That's still. Okay, turning the sound on.
You know what? I can just do this because I have power. There we go. That's actually useful. All right. Hello. Welcome everyone. Don't worry if you're still getting bagels or coffee. It's okay. I'm just doing the normal spiel in the beginning, so it's okay. Feel free to get all your accoutrements before we sit down and get going with Rachel. But before we begin, I just wanted to welcome everyone again and announce that we have a call for proposals. If you're interested in speaking at Active Teaching Lab, maybe you have an idea that you are percolating around. Maybe you know somebody who would be a good speaker. We still have a couple spots open, so please feel free to send me an email. Send me a name, and we'll get people signed up to present next semester, which just keeps this community of learning going, and I really appreciate everyone who has been speaking, such as Rachel today. So there's the call for proposals. I have actually 2 lab experiments today. I timed them out, so we'll get to them. So the handout today, make sure that if you haven't signed up to the course, you do so. The URL is right there, especially if you're online. Another kind of heads up as well for everyone, the Teaching and Learning Symposium is coming up. Good grief, what's the date today? The 4th. It's almost like a month away. It's just over a month away. 2020 is a month away, and we have no flying cars. It's still not quite the future yet. But January 9th, 2020, Teaching and Learning Symposium coming up. We'll be the theme this year is Achieving Equity. We have a great speaker lined up for that. Lots of presenters. Hello. And please register by December 15th so that way we know how much food to order and get everything prepped for you. So December 15th, check out the URL right there at the bottom. If you need help, if you have a question, if you need to make a comment today, Kathy's sitting up front monitoring chat on YouTube. Ed Price is here as well. He doesn't quite score a picture on the screen. Maybe in the future, we'll have to see.
Something to shoot for.
Something to shoot for. One day, Ed, one day. So today I just wanted to, we're going to have Rachel Baum speak to us today, and I just wanted to just do a short introduction and I'll just introduce her. So Rachel Baum is Senior Lecturer and Coordinator in the Department of Foreign Language and Literature and Deputy Director of the Sam and Helen Stahl Center for Jewish Studies. She earned her BA at Brown University and PhD right here at UW-Milwaukee. And Dr. Baum's current research explores how new technology, such as holography and virtual reality, are impacting our memory of the Holocaust. She teaches regularly on the Holocaust, Jewish film, and Jewish American culture, and comes to us today to talk about her experience with student-centered learning. So, thank you for coming and welcome.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you to Lane for the invitation to come and for helping me actually think through what I wanted to share today. So for those of you who don't know me, I just want to share a little bit that might be background here. I've been teaching here for 22 years, and one of the courses that I teach regularly is a course on representations of the Holocaust that I actually developed over 22 years ago. So I have the experience of teaching the same course over different iterations for a very long time, which is some background for how my thinking has changed in terms of thinking about the design of Canvas. And at first, I have to admit, I did not think that I necessarily had something to share with this group because although I was an early adopter of Canvas, it's got a lot of cool tricks that I don't know that I'm necessarily using. But what I found through talking to Lane, it was a really positive experience because I realized that Canvas actually has made me a better teacher. And some of the ways in which it's made me a better teacher are very simple things that you can do in Canvas, which I thought might be particularly helpful for people who are new to Canvas, people who are just starting to put their courses into Canvas, to think about how to start with what you want to see happen for your students, and how Canvas can support you in doing that. So one of the things that I have changed over the years is that I now, thanks to some workshops that I took at CETL, give my students note cards at the beginning of class. I do this face-to-face, and I also do it online through virtual note cards using Canvas's quizzing function. And I used to use note cards to ask students, like, why are you interested in this class? What's your previous experience with this class? Sort of those kinds of content issues. But now I ask questions that are more focused on who my students are. So I ask them what the challenges are that they see in achieving success in my course, and also what the resources are, the things that will help them to be successful in my class. And through that experience, I've really had to confront how difficult so many of our students' lives are. And I found through my experience with these note cards that not only do most of my students work, but many of them are working 40 hours a week, and they're full-time students, and they have family obligations, and they, as you're all nodding, so you know this about our students. And that has made me think differently about teaching and what it means to have an effective class. So, first I was thinking, okay, if my online classroom is the classroom, then questions of how do we create a classroom space of equity and inclusion are a question in part about the learning management system, right? How is it that the learning management system can help me in my course goals? And through my work at CETL, with CETL, we've all been exposed to this concept of backwards design, right? Where you start with what do you want your students to be able to do at the end of the semester, and how can you create assignments that will bridge them to that. But in thinking about these note cards, I realized that that was not the full picture anymore, because that really prioritized my learning goals for my students and my content. And then I realized, but if my students are having these really complex lives, then how do I create that same kind of backwards design that builds in their lived realities? And Canvas has helped me to do that, which is what I wanted to share with you today. So the concept of scaffolding, I imagine, is familiar to everyone in this room, and we, again, tend to think of it as how do you scaffold assignments so that if I want my students at the end of the semester to be able to do this, how do I create smaller assignments that will get them there? Okay. Again, it's a good concept, one that's been useful to me, but in thinking about these larger questions of my students' lives, it felt insufficient. And I started to think about how do I create scaffolding, not just with the assignments of my class, but scaffolding that can reach out to students in a variety of ways. How do I create scaffolding that reaches to other classes? How do I create scaffolding that positions my class as part of their college education and not their whole college education? Right? And so what I started to use, and it's very simple, but it's been really transformative for me, is to use the ability to create links in Canvas to create a more robust site that gives students options of additional learning. That says, here's some additional help that you might need, right? And here's a way to get it, and it's only a link. Now, it sounds really simple, but in a learning management system that doesn't use links as artistically, right, as easily, adding extra things to your course site can make a course site really bloated, right, in a way that can turn students off from learning. But because links here are so elegant, really, and so easy to put in to a page, it creates the ability to create more scaffolding, more differentiating of learning on the page. So this became really important to me this semester because I'm teaching a course that is a jointly offered course between Jewish Studies and Film Studies. It's an upper level course on Holocaust film. So some of my students are film studies students who have a lot of expertise in film studies, and they know the language of film studies and how to analyze a film, but they have no knowledge about very limited knowledge about the Holocaust. Some of my students are Jewish studies students who have taken other courses on the Holocaust but have no experience with the language of film, and they're very intimidated, right? Some of my students, of course you have experienced this as well, are neither and need some support in all of that. So I had to create a course site, and I spent a lot of time thinking about this. How do I create a course site that invites everyone in and lets everybody learn at their critical edge of learning? right? So how do I bring those Jewish studies students on board in order to be able to learn how to analyze film? And how do I give the film students enough background in the Holocaust that they can engage meaningfully with the subject? And so what I ended up doing, this is just a small example of it, is just a little extra. If you've not taken a college course in film studies, you're going to be helped by these brief introductions and then giving links. The film studies students had similar links related to the Holocaust. And I'm thinking about them as kind of off-ramps. Right, places where the students can kind of get off to learn a little bit more and to take control of their own learning. And that acknowledges also that we're not all in the same place. So for my Jewish studies students, writing a pretty rudimentary analysis of a Holocaust film is where they need to be. And for my film studies students, I can expect more. Okay? This works in the other direction as well, in terms of creating links to create extra credit for what I'm calling stretch goals. So what I did was I thought to myself, if my students didn't work 40 hours a week, if they had more available time, what kind of immersion in my topic do I want for them? And I tried to create those opportunities using links and built them into extra credit. So for example, there was a unit where we're talking in my lower level class where we're talking about Schindler's List, but they don't see it. It's a 3-hour film. My film studies students in the upper level class see it, but my lower level students don't. And then I was able to create a link, because Canvas does this so well, to another page that said, for extra credit, you can watch this film. I embedded it. It's a film we own. So I was able to embed it on that page and say, and here's a discussion post for you to contribute to, and now you're going to get extra credit for that. Okay. Now, the reason why I see this as part of questions of equity is because it gives students class points for engaging in the subject, right? And Canvas makes that more possible and more elegant so that if students don't do the extra credit, they don't have a feeling that they're being left behind. Module requirements are one of those things that I learned about from Lane, and I thought it was a good idea, but I didn't really think beyond that. I just thought, oh, that could be interesting. But as I started to look at my class through the lens of equity and inclusion and creating a space where everyone can feel invited into the learning experience, I realized how helpful module requirements are, right? So if you haven't used module requirements, what it lets you do is, and when you go to edit your module, you'll see that module requirements are just one of the options, and it lets you say students have to finish 1 before they go to 2. Students have to mark it as done before they get to see the next screen. Right? And I don't always use it because the order in which students learn is not always important, but often in my classes it is. I want students to read this before they watch the film, and then I don't want them to do the discussion until they've seen the film, and this allows them to have that ordering for them. And again, it really helped me in thinking about, I love to-do lists, right? I feel overwhelmed. To-do lists sort of calm me down. I like the check marks. It makes me feel like I'm making progress in my goals, and why wouldn't I offer that to my students as well? And also I think the ordering can be really helpful for first-generation students, for students who are unfamiliar with online learning. They don't have to be first-generation students, just students who are overwhelmed, students who have ADHD in a variety of ways. This is a gift, I think, that can order things for our students and invite more people into the learning. The other thing that I've been thinking about, and in full disclosure, this is a work in progress. One of the pleasures of teaching a course over and over again is that the course can keep getting better. And one of the pleasures of this online format, and I was thinking about this, that this is one of the ways, the things that I'm describing are ways in which the online format makes face-to-face learning better, right? Because you can build this, this robust class and do things online that are not possible to do in the same way in the face-to-face class. That differentiated learning relies on this platform in this case. So in terms of readability, here are the questions that I've been mulling over. How can a well-designed Canvas site make students want to learn? And how can my Canvas site express the enthusiasm that I feel about my subject? And so this is about really, how do we think about design as a question of pedagogy, right? So again, some of these are small tweaks that can make a really big difference to your students. I was thinking as I was preparing for this that when my kids were young, I wrote conference papers in like 5-minute increments. My kids would literally brush their teeth and I would run and put 2 more sentences on my paper. And I was thinking, I have compassion for the way that I was managing things. I think my students are living very similar lives, where sometimes they have 10 minutes in between all of the things that they're doing to come to my class site. Can I give them a meaningful experience in a short time? Some of them will create chunks of time instead, but things like breaking the text into small chunks, that students shouldn't come to our course sites and see a wall of text. Things like adding images, right, to make it more accessible, to make students want to learn. Things that I've just started working with are, I realized that because I try to create a robust Canvas site, my modules can feel really long. And I realize like that's got to be kind of overwhelming for students. So I'm trying to break them up to using the indent feature in Canvas to separate some of the modules, or to create kind of resting points. Like I haven't done this yet, but I'm thinking about putting in timings into them to say, I expect this section of the module to take you 20 minutes, right? Tell them up front, then they can plan their time, or in more transparent ways. I'm planning over break to start adding audio files to some of my short pages. Now, Canvas has accessibility features that will read your pages for you, but I was thinking, this is a really easy, low barrier of entry for me to use my phone, make some audio files of those pages where students can hear me read it in my own voice. In the past, I've used, I use lectures with video voice over PowerPoint, but I was thinking, just a little 2 minutes of me, 2 minutes of me, and then they can pick how they want to engage with the material. And then lastly, that Canvas lets you use Student View, which lets you see your Canvas site through the eyes of a student. I want to use that kind of as a metaphor, right? Of how can we dim in a way our teacherly view and pull up the volume on the student view to really look at our sites through the eyes, not just of a random student, an abstract student, but literally through our students' eyes who are busy and exhausted and worried about money and overstressed, and think about how to use design elements in order to create sites that are engaging, that are inviting, that let them read on their phones, that let them engage with the amounts of time that they have. So as we move into thinking about discussion, this is the question that I'm really interested in exploring and continuing to explore. And as I look at my own Canvas sites and try to change the design elements of them, this is the question that has been resonating with me. How can we design Canvas sites in ways that support our students and build greater equity and access? Thank you so much. Not bragging, but 15 minutes and 4 seconds.
4 seconds over.
Any questions? Rachel? I do. Did you have any questions? I did have a question. So I've heard others, we've talked about student-centered learning before, and one of the comments you often see, well, is this just about making my course easier? Is this about dumbing my course down? Could you comment on that?
Yeah, I think we've all heard that a lot. There's a lot of disparagement, unfortunately, of our students and, their lower attention spans. And some of that is just remembering that the world has changed. I mean, when I went to college, the internet, I'm sorry, I'm aging myself, but it's true, right? The internet didn't exist. The World Wide Web didn't exist, right? The internet was something used by scientists. And so it's just a different world. So the question is, we are where we are, and our university is what it is. I don't see this actually as a way of dumbing down class material. I see it actually as a way of enriching class material, because you can also create more stretch goals for your students, more engagement, more networks, if you will, of learning that lets them be more engaged in your course site. I also try to start with the assumption that students want to learn. And I think that sometimes, unfortunately, we don't, right? That we think, oh, students are just here to get the degree or whatever. But if you start from the assumption that your students really want to learn your subject, then I think the questions become more, how do we create course sites that enable that for them, right? That encourage that kind of learning.
I have a question. So at one moment you said that you asked them what are the resources available to them to help them succeed in the course. How do you approach that? Because in my experience, I always put like, a list of things, like places, that they can go or like, reach out. But then it's like, usually those students that need it don't go through that, like through that page or anything. And they are like, oh, I didn't know about this. But how do you approach, like letting them know what kind of resources are available or?
Yeah, it's a good question because I think we all struggle with that. It's interesting, I've never done this, but thinking about some of the issues of the Canvas site in particular, it seems to me that, like, I have it on my syllabus, but if I put it as a page on the Canvas site and made it part of a module requirement that students couldn't progress with the class until they at least skim that page, right? I would make sure that they all opened it. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to go.
Yes.
And I would say too, this is a side note to Canvas, although I think it's related. I teach the Holocaust a lot. And so thinking about students' emotional well-being is a pedagogical issue for me, because if students are overwhelmed by the material or just utterly depressed, they will not continue in the course. So things like Canvas allowing me I put animal videos up sometimes, I give them a breather, I sort of mandate mental health breaks, and Canvas, even in the online format, can sort of help with that, as well as the kinds of supports of letting them know that the Writing Center does online tutoring. And online students in particular, I think, often don't think about campus resources as something that they can access. So I think highlighting the online of our campus resources, we do, I think, a pretty good job of that. Yeah.
So is this a course that a student can progress on their own pace?
No.
Or no? They are like a deadline for assignment?
Yes. So students in my courses have all of their work is due either once a week or every other week, depending on the size of the module. So it's not self-progressed. And I've only now started thinking about these module requirements, which doesn't make it self-paced, but at least sort of lets them see what they've done, right? And have a sense of the order. Because I think, again, like if you're looking at a Wikipedia page and you have all of those links, there's not a sense that you have to click the first one before you click the last one, right? You get to click on whatever interests you. And I think we can help our students to think about, is this a page where you can click on anything? Or is this a page where I want you to, right? And I have both, right? Sometimes I don't mind if they're clicking around, but sometimes it really matters. And just trying to make that distinction.
So the student don't have to finish one module to move on to the next one. Those are two separate modules. They're not.
Right. I mean, because I have regular assignments, if they miss an entire module, then they would have not done the assignment, and then they would start to fall behind in the class. Side note, Canvas also lets you build in some nice flexibility about deadlines, which I think is good, that you can sort of say, it's due here, it's due now, but it won't go away until this point. So you can create kind of a buffer for your students if you want that buffer.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Have you gotten any feedback from your students about how they perceive what you're doing?
Students have been incredibly grateful. I have come to a pedagogical perspective where I prioritize flexibility almost everything else, right? So, and I have flexibility in a variety of ways, but and students say again and again how grateful they are for my prioritizing flexibility because it's the thing that helps them most, right? So if I have a grace period for handing in assignments, right? If they have a deadline, but if they're running late, they can have a little buffer. It makes their lives, it creates some breathing room in their lives. And my sense, thinking about the work that I've received, is that it doesn't diminish the quality of their work at all. Often students feel like, well, I would have rushed to hand it in, but since you gave me this buffer, I have more time to do work that I'm proud of. So flexibility for the students I teach has been really valued.
I have two questions. One was about, you were talking about it was on the readability slide.
Mhm.
You were talking about breaking up modules with indents and resting points. And I was wondering what kind of resting point? And also, related to that, how do you decide how big a module is gonna be? That's kind of question, I don't know how many, it's question one and so on. But and the other question, I really like how you, I liked a lot of this, and I'm really excited about it. But I was really, I appreciated your point about everybody being at their critical edge of learning. But then I'm also wondering, so how do you grade, here's the assignment, and the film studies students are doing this, and the Jewish studies students are doing this, how do you grade them? Like what happens in that assignment? And do they get like a chance to redo if they skip the pages that they really kind of should have read to get them to where they're, given these different areas of expertise that we're in. So anyway, these two questions, the module question.
Yeah, I'll answer the second one first, which is, I think that's a great and important question. I am aware of the fact that teaching in the humanities, I have more flexibility, or I'm able to use flexibility more perhaps than, you know, somebody who's teaching a biology course and needs to make sure that their pre-med students have what they need in order to progress in their, right? So nobody is counting on their Holocaust knowledge for the next class, and I'm aware of that. That said, you know, because of that, I'm also comfortable with teaching being more of an art than a science. Meaning I think that you can create rubrics that create enough flexibility that everyone can do well on some element of it. Meaning rubrics can be either or rather than everyone being exactly the same, right? That an acceptance of difference. But also I think it shows the importance of knowing your students, right? How do you know when a student is really working? And obviously we don't always know, but the more you know your students and what they've taken and what they're working on. And again, in my particular class with the film students, they're all juniors and seniors who are highly motivated. So that's easier than it would be at a lower level where people might be taking it for GER or other things. In terms of modules, in my own Canvas journey, since I used it the first semester it was available for us, I am using links much more to make my pages tighter, because I'm aware that if students log on and they see a module this long, even if I know that each one is short, it makes them have feelings. It makes them feel overwhelmed. And so instead, and it takes some extra work, it's easier to just go through and say, here's a link, here's a short paragraph, here's a page, but instead I'm trying to create internal links so that I can have one page and then say, okay, learn this, and then I'll say, click on all of the links in this, compared to some pages say, the links are only for information, and click if you want, but you don't have to. And I try to distinguish for them my own relationship to the links. The resting points, I haven't used yet. This is something I'm thinking about. But for the longer units, I'm thinking, can I break it up? So sometimes I have 2-week units. And wouldn't it be helpful for me to tell my students, I think about this big unit in 3 chunks. You can do all 3 chunks at once if you want, but it might be helpful. And just giving them those signposts so they can say, okay, I'm gonna do the first chunk on Monday and I'm gonna do the second chunk, you know, and they can break up their time. And just trying to make more things transparent, which I think Canvas does let you do more easily.
Well, I'm gonna cut off questions right here. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your excellent engagement.
So lots of things to think about, and one of the things that I wanted to highlight today was really thinking about the importance of page design in student-centered learning and how students read the internet, right? So we want to be thinking about where our students are and not where they were. How are students interacting with content now? How are they reading things now? Not how they read things when we were in college or even when we were, our primary engagement with content was often on a book, right? And now it's online. So that changes how people read that content. So, I mean, think about that. How do we read the internet different than how we read physical text? Does anybody have any ideas? Yeah.
It's a lot more point of need, kind of scan for the big points.
Scan for the big, so it's really about need.
Yeah,
Right,
and
exactly.
usually, and I think just based on like user experience design research, tend to like focus on big headings and things like that first, and then sort of identify what's worth your time and sort of dive in deeper as needed.
Awesome. You said almost too much, honey. It's perfect. Yes.
I so urge to click all the time. The blue text, and I'm gonna click this one.
I'm gonna click that. Yeah, absolutely. So it's distractible, right? It's built to keep you engaged, to keep you clicking, to keep you within this environment. It's different than how we read physical text, right? It's significantly different. And when we are thinking about how the students are gonna interact with that text and we want the students to actually learn that content, we can't just put text online like we would on a piece of paper. It has to adapt to how students are reading differently online versus how they're reading on a physical piece of paper, because this is a different medium. So today's activity, because that's the thing that everyone on the blue sheets always asks for, is more hands-on activities. So that's today. I have 3 readings for you. You don't have to read the content, right? Though you can, because it's interesting. But really look at how it's formatted. Look at how it's organized. Think about which one of these is doing things well. Really, not any of them is the correct answer, but what on example A, B, and C are doing things well? Which of these examples are doing things poorly? What would you do differently? How would you change that? So if you don't have a computer, there is one up front, or you can kind of slide on over to someone who does have a computer open. I see most people do. And check out A, B, and C. I want you to read that over for 2 minutes. Think about what, some of those ideas that we were talking about. I have instructions right here on the handout. And then I want you to talk to that partner and just kind of think about some things, brainstorm together, and then we'll come back together as a group in about 3 or 4 minutes. All right, so get to it.
Oh, no, I would have.
And if you're following it online, please feel free to read the sheet. Please read the sheets as well, and then contact or on the YouTube chat, put some material in there for Kathy.
And then there's, at least there's some heading.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the one.
So long.
Ese baile.
It was a lot.
Ah, okay.
Slide on over, it's okay. Be friends, be friends.
Yeah.
It's the hardest part is getting up and moving over.
Right.
You have yours up?
Yeah.
As they say.
Okay.
Just
He's good at this, you are not.
What's called I hate personnel paragraph, right? That's why I've read the books.
I know that they decided
Oh, that's impressive. You could almost teach a yoga class.
Well, we have been doing We Fit.
Oh.
So, which does involve yoga.
Yeah.
I can do this on a tree.
Well, I like them both, I think.
So we'll get you one more minute. So one more minute, wrap up those conversations. Have one or two things you'd like to share back with the group.
Yeah, this is much more along the lines of what I do.
Oh, yeah. I haven't tried it yet.
I always
This one to be based in place.
It was kind of connected along into
And you like to think
this week about
Oh, yeah.
like the elements of working hours. There was a big
I noticed that. We must have did that this week because that's what I
video with the ears. And I usually say
What they have to process.
so this would probably be like one page.
That is really cool.
And I know.
And then you can read it whatever way you want.
Or required.
It could be horrible.
I struggle with this one my second
Yeah, sometimes like Google Translate is it's not sure if that's but still. It could help like if somebody
Historically, of course.
Also, you have to be mindful of
the language is kind of dense.
we
So
have-
they make use of those That's very good.
So we're gonna bring this back together here. We're gonna get back together as a group. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for your really good conversations going on. Maybe you're all talking about the Packers or something. I don't know. I couldn't hear everything. So we're gonna start going back in. And I'm gonna check out the first example, example A. And that will eventually open. So here we have example A. Did you have any conversations about example A? So I'll just kind of scroll through this. Yes, Bill?
Immediately reader fatigue. Like you turn the page in a book and there's no paragraph break.
Yes.
Part of your brain goes, "Ah!" You know, like, no,
It was
you are
like
giving me
reading
no break.
Marx in
I didn't
undergrad.
even get that far, it was just like, ooh, no, click back.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Get me out of here.
What was that?
My first thought was nope.
Nope. Yeah, and where do you, I mean, what were you saying before about content? You're looking for,
I'm looking for sort of the main point so I know what to expect and what I should be focusing on as a reader and a learner.
what are we supposed to focus on as a reader? And
I
a
mean, there
learner?
isn't even, I mean, it's not even a heading, it's just bolded halfway.
There's a
through the
bold.
page. And then honestly, and like speaking as somebody, like I'm actually dyslexic. And so a page like this, as a student, even though I did pretty well in school,
Yeah.
I would either skip to that first heading first and just read the second half of the page, which is obviously not what you're supposed to do.
Yeah,
Or I might just like do a quick scan and skip it entirely.
yeah,
And like obviously I want my students to read everything on a page as well and engage with it, but I myself would engage with that and and I have advanced degrees, so.
yeah, absolutely. But this is kind of what it would look like maybe in a textbook, in a book, right? We would learn, we would kind of figure out how to read this in a book because we would read it differently, because we read books differently, right? Let's look at, did anyone else have a comment on A?
Oh,
Yes, Sarah.
I just want to point out,
And you don't have to,
like, I essentially kind of did the same thing, like looked for where is there some bold text that
Yeah.
stands out a bit more. So using that, I was essentially able to scan the bolded text. It was difficult, but I was able to do it.
right,
Whereas if I were using a screen reader, I wouldn't have been able to do that.
thank you.
Because screen readers don't pick up on, like, you need the headings to be able to do any kind of scanning or
Yeah.
something with screen.
So the headings aren't just for nice looks, it's to help screen readers pop around inside the document, especially if it's super long. So there's an accessibility thing going on where you can kind of figure it out. You have to work at it, right? Which kind of defeats, we're making them really work at just how to interact with the text. We want them to focus on the content,
Yeah.
but without having that bold, you kind of undermine, especially for
The
screen
headers
readers.
make it easier for me,
Yeah,
but for some people, the headers make it possible at all.
Well,
thank
and
you.
especially screen readers don't like have a nice like narrative voice. It would just be like a robot just reading word for word with very little breaks, and it would be just like very hard for processing, I think.
Yes.
So I'm old enough to remember that I highlighted textbooks.
Ah,
And when I highlighted textbooks, I did it because either the professor talked about it,
Uh-huh.
so I knew it was important, or the author broke it down where you could tell that they were emphasizing a particular point because of the way the structure of the text.
Right.
And I would highlight this, I would highlight it everything, because
Yeah.
you have virtually no idea what the author thinks is important and what is not.
because it's all on the same level.
Yes.
It's on the same level, it's just the throwing. Okay, really good comments. Awesome. All right, let's go to B. What were your comments on B? It's the same text, by the way, right? Yes.
This one was almost worse for me because
Ah.
there's no consistency of design. So before, at least you sort of knew where to look, or you can assume an order of reading.
Right.
But here, like one starts in the middle of the page, and that's the first actual heading you see. And like there's all these bullets and indents, and there's no real rhyme or reason to when they're used. I mean, I didn't
Sure.
do a close read, but like,
Yeah.
why is something? I mean, it looks like a textbook page, but it's also, it's still a lot, but it's a confusing a lot. Now.
Sure. It's confusing. Is it better or worse?
I think it's worse.
It's worse. Okay, worse. That's what's all right. Anybody else?
Thought it was better, but still not good.
Still not good. Like, what was not good about it? Just the
I
things.
think it's still a large amount, breaking every one of those possibly into a separate page.
Okay, yeah. There's just a lot of context here. You have a little bit more scaffolding. These are header 2s, I think, right? So screen reader is a little bit better. But at the same time, it's a wall of text. Right. What about what about the links? Now, there's no links right here. Here's one right there. So you can pop over those. Did you even see those?
Yeah.
Okay, but with that might be helpful for more reading, or there's no context given, or what should we do with the links? Big Bill.
Well, there's so many links that I wasn't sure what the context of this was. is this the whole course? This can't be just 1 week's assignment, because it's a massive amount of work.
Yeah,
With the links, just going to and seeing what all the links are about, getting through this is gonna take you a couple hours.
right. And I really like what Rachel was doing. She had links, internal navigation, but she was explaining what it is they're going to be getting out of this. What's important. And you explained at the beginning, should you be doing all of these links? Should you be doing some of these links? So that was really helpful. This is just in there, right? Now, to be fair, if you look way at the bottom, there I have, it's just basically, this is a long essay article in the Chronicle of Higher Education. Right? Now all of a sudden this starts making more sense, right? Okay, right? But at the same time, I've seen pages like this, and the person thinks, well, I've put a lot of effort. Look, I put, the world's best online teacher mug illustration. I put these little headers. It's really colorful. It's nice, right? But that's not quite enough, right? That's even worse, as you were saying. There's not consistency. Consistency is so important. Absolutely. Having a wall of text just overwhelms a person, even when there are breaks and more white space available, right? It's better chunked out. We can see, okay, I can see a little bit better what's happening. I have to read here and then I can take a breather. But it's just like I have to keep going. I have to get all the way down to 10. It's so much stuff. And then, did you get to the bottom? Did anyone get to the bottom? Very, very bottom. All the way to the bottom. This is actually this is something else I put on there. That wasn't on the Chronicle, right? Because this is how we read the internet, just how Heidi was saying, right? We don't read the internet, and it's important to remember this for your students. We don't read the internet like you read a book, where you read like a mystery novel, you read every word, right? You're scanning for bullets, you're scanning for points, you're scanning for information. And when people read, they read in an F pattern, all right? You read in an F pattern. You read the first paragraph or two first. That's where your instructions and your overarching theme should be for each page. And then we look for bullet points, and that's how we read. And the other thing is, no one saw this, even though there was an illustration. One, because they didn't give you much time. But two, because it's at the very bottom. And what does that communicate to you about any web page? Think of Google. Do you click on the links at the bottom of your hits? No, you click at the top, right? All the important information on a website should be above the horizon. Should be above where you start having to scroll down. The most important stuff should be at the top. So think about that. Think about bullets, or think about having internal links. You can do all kinds of things in your design that help student navigate your page. Because if you think about it, your competition, or the way your students learn how to read, is not from a book online. They're learning how to read from other websites. And websites are designed in this pattern, in an F-shaped pattern. This is long established. And they're looking for important information at the top. That's how we need to be organizing, because that's what your students are already expecting. And when you change that, you're kind of having to make them relearn how you teach, not think about the content you're trying to teach. Yeah.
And also with the really long ones, what struck me is that, I feel mad.
Yeah.
Right? If I have to keep scrolling, I feel mad at the person who created the site. I feel like you didn't care. This is just thrown up there.
Yeah.
Right? And so if that's what we're unintentionally forecasting to our students, that would be a real issue, of course.
You're devaluing the information, especially anything at that second half. You're devaluing it because it's like, I just threw it on there, it's not important. You're focused on the top, you aren't focused on the bottom, and you're kind of frustrated that they didn't put any thought or effort into this, right? Even though you might have, it's really good content, it's just the organization of that content is undermining it entirely. So that presentation is really important. Okay, so obviously then we get to 3, and what do we think about that? And again, I think there could be some improvements on this too. What were we thinking about C? Yeah.
C is okay, but it relies on the student to actually go to source. It's really small there, kind of lost.
Yeah.
So to actually get more out of it.
Yep.
And also the link is to the Chronicle of Higher Education, and sometimes those are subscription based.
Ah.
So if they're not on campus, they would have to log in and maybe retrieve it somehow or get it
Yeah.
to the library website. Sometimes it's annoying to me also.
Yeah.
Like it's not straightforward. So maybe like a PDF instead of a link. I don't know.
Or explaining to them how they might get to it,
Yes.
right? Some anticipation.
Yes.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, and especially it speaks to the importance of checking your URLs in the semester, because the Chronicle often leaves it up for free for a while, then they'll take it down.
Yes.
Well, it might have worked the first couple times you taught it, but by the end, it's like, well, this is an archive. You have to have a subscription. You're like, well, there it goes. So absolutely, checking over your links. Excellent. Did you notice here, add visual appeal? So be mindful of that. Be mindful of adding some stuff. If people are anticipating, you know, like if you're talking about an illustration, that illustration should be there, right? If you're talking about something, it should definitely be there. It should just be on that same page. Awesome. So this is just thinking about your page, right? But really thinking about it and how students read online, and really thinking about what other websites are doing well, because that's what your students are anticipating. And that's really kind of at the heart of what learning-centered design is about, is thinking about what their needs are and how they're going to be interacting with that content. All right, any other questions or observations on that?
I guess I just have a curiosity because, I mean, the B option was clearly just the copy and paste from the article.
Totally.
So if you're doing the copy and paste from the article, then technically they should be using like an F online pattern or whatever because it's an online article, right?
Yeah.
I just have curiosity as to like, you know, how do you know like when that's a good idea to like use
The
like
F?
the F pattern? Like how do you know like that an online author has like made this great F pattern for you to be able to just easily use it in
Right.
and versus like needing to find you know like figure out a way to like put the content in a better format for students to digest it.
Yeah.
And I get like that. I mean, I think that mainly Dante and I talked about the, you know, like lack of subscription and the access point and that being a key thing to make certain that like we're having that readily available.
Yep.
So I think that sometimes it's helpful if you really are wanting them to read the entire article to have the article readily available.
Right.
But I get that that was a lot to digest or maybe
Yeah.
not well done.
I think one way to do it would be to add your own synopsis at the top, because that's that F, the top bar right there, that your information wrapping up what's the main points that you really want them to take away, and then you can have that link to the article. And I think having the links like Rachel did is like saying, hey, this is the article coming up. And I try to do that actually on some of those links that I have on the back here of where to get more information. I give a synopsis of what that link is, right? What are you going to find on this link? Why would you even care if you wanted to click on this link? And I think that's where you're going to be able to draw the people in, and being able to explain, then help them set them up to see what you think is important, because they want to know what is it that this class is trying to get out of that, which that article may not be entirely aligned. The last thing I want to show on this page is a new button. Right there, the immersive reader. And this came up just this week, all right? And this may actually have some impact on how you design your courses, and you should think about that. So the immersive reader allows you, it basically takes a screen reader, it's built by Microsoft, and then Canvas just integrated it. I have links about information on the bottom right here. So you can just search for those on Google, or you can take the digital version, which is available on this course. Click on that and you'll be able to learn a little bit more about it. But just to kind of give you an overview, it'll basically make any page, only pages, not PDFs, not assignments, not discussions, just pages. Some of those are kind of in the works, but just pages. And it'll turn it into a screen reader, right? So I can click right here.
December 4th, C. At visual appeal. Online courses suffer a well-earned reputation of being ugly, dry, boring, and unappealing.
Right, and we can slow that down a little bit.
Unappealing. Humans are more likely to want to be innocent.
Right, and if we want to get, we can translate that into Norwegian, because that's something people do in Norway. And if you'll notice, they've actually put some thought into this, because it sounds like my grandparents talking, right? It had a little bit of the cadence, right, that you'd associate with that target language. So this could either be a dream come true or a nightmare for foreign language people. I'm not certain which one it would be. But it will allow you to take any text and translate it or put it into a screen reader, change the size so that it's more accessible for somebody with difficulty with eyesight. But one thing that it may make you rethink is how much information you're putting on PDFs. Like if you type up a document and put it in a PDF, that won't be accessible on the screen reader because it only does pages. So it may be thinking when you're designing stuff about what information you put as an HTML document and what information you're putting as a PDF, because only HTML will be screen readable. Yes?
Can I make a shameless plug for the library? I'm actually working on documentation right now on best practices for embedding licensed library content into Canvas with considerations for accessibility. And like the PDF thing is a big deal that, you know, for the students that like to print out and read things, it's a nice option, but for the most part, in terms of accessibility, especially if we're thinking about people taking their classes, you know, everywhere they go, whether it's at work on their lunch break or, you know, picking up their kids from daycare and they're just like waiting in the car, taking a quick look at their phones or whatever. Linking out to licensed content is usually the best bet over PDFs, and especially with this immersive reader function in there. So, and I'm in the middle of doing the video content one right now. The PDF or the articles and books have already been documented, and I can send that link to you.
Please do, and then I'll send that off to the group. So I'll promote that because that's an awesome resource. Thank you.
How do you make it work? Because if you link something to an external website, it won't have the immersive reader anymore, right?
It will not necessarily, but many, like all EBSCO databases have their own immersive reader built in, or an HTML reader, so you can link out to the regular HTML. You can certainly copy chunks. I would still probably not recommend you know, copying and pasting an entire article into a page. I mean, especially for like copyright reasons, that's not really a good idea either.
And it'll look like what I just showed.
Yeah,
you didn't
absolutely.
lose the internal organization that they already put into.
Yeah, and I think that there's also this idea too that yes, we think of like online as its own genre, but like there's still there's difference in genre online, right, or in format. So like the article from Chronicle of Higher Ed, like that's still a news article, and it's formatted as such. That's what we recognize as a news article. But it's going to be formatted differently than an instructional page. And certainly, whether they're conscious of it or not, our students recognize that. If they're linking out and reading from a news page, they're expecting a news article. But if they're in Canvas, they're not really expecting that format, and we should be mindful of not just forcing that format into a place where it doesn't belong.
Heidi, you're kind of like going to be presenting here next year.
I have some ideas.
So thank you for that. I really appreciate all the comments. We did not get to the second experiment, which is about helping kind of training students on the skills and habits you want them to form. I'll include that on lab notes tomorrow, but you feel free to take that quiz and kind of think about what information I was trying to reinforce. It's not perfect, it was just one shot at it, but at the same time, thinking about how you can use quizzes on a syllabus to help you save time in the class from having to review that syllabus and helping students to get that information. I'll talk more about it in lab notes, but I just wanted to give you a heads up for what that was. On the back of today's handout, though, is some more information on student-centered learning, so definitely check that out. Some really great links and articles there, and some strategies in case you're interested in more of what Rachel was doing. Otherwise, please do come again next week. First, please do fill out the evaluation. That's how we learn. That's how we know what to do better next time. So fill that out, please. Do contact me if you have any ideas about presenting next semester in Active Teaching Lab. And thank you all for your ideas and sharing today. I really appreciated it. Just the bouncing back and forth, the conversation, the community of practice. I really appreciated that. And also, I just wanted to thank Cedal again for the bagels and coffee. I appreciate those, and I'm sure you do as well. Next week, we have another Active Teaching Lab, so please do bring a buddy. Actually, that's where I'm going to go to right now. I'm going to bug out and go to see Buddy the Elf on a play. And next week, though, is our last active teaching lab of the semester. Nathan Young will be talking about organizing a Canvas course. So thank you all. Please, please come back next week for that. Thank you again, Rachel.